Okay, for today's objective, I will multiply integers. So for my first example, I have a positive 3 times negative 2. On my second example, I have negative 3 times negative 2. In my last example, I have a negative 3 times 2. And I'm using the same numbers, just with different signs, so you can see how to apply the rules. There are 3 rules that we're going to follow. The first rule where it says to multiply their absolute values. Second rule says if the numbers have the same sign, the answer will be positive. And rule number 3 says that if the numbers have different signs, the answer will be negative. Remember, we are multiplying integers, we're not adding or subtracting. So I'm going to follow rule number 1, multiply their absolute values. So I'm going to find the absolute value of 3, and I'm going to find the absolute value of negative 2. The absolute value of 3 is just 3, and the absolute value of negative 2 is just 2, and it says multiply their absolute value, so I'm going to multiply them. So 3 times 2 is 6, so I have the answer. But now I need to look at my original numbers. One is positive, one is negative, so I'm going to go to rule number 2. Same signs, the answer will be positive. Well, the numbers don't have the same sign, so I'm going to go to rule number 3. Different signs. So the numbers have different signs, so that means that my answer must be negative. So now I'm going to write the answer that I got, 6, with a new sign, so my answer is negative 6. So a positive times a negative gives me a negative answer. Okay, for number 2, for example number 2, I'm going to use the same rules. First, I'm going to multiply their absolute values. So I'm going to find the absolute value of negative 3, and I'm going to find the absolute value of negative 2. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3. The absolute value of negative 2 is just 2. And it says to multiply their values. So I'm going to multiply 3 times 2 is 6. Now, I'm looking at rule number 2. And rule number 2 says, if the numbers have the same signs, so you go back to the original numbers, if the numbers have the same sign, the answer will be positive. So here it is. My answer will be positive and positive 6. Okay, so then a negative times a negative, the answer will be positive. They have the same sign, so the answer is positive. For example, number 3, now I have a negative times a positive, and I'm going to use the same rules. It's always the same rules. So I'm going to find the absolute value of negative 3. I'm going to find the absolute value of positive 2. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3, and the absolute value of positive 2 is just 2. And it says multiply their values, so I'm going to multiply them. 3 times 2 is 6. Then I look at the original equation. So I have a negative times a positive. So I have different signs. So that means that the answer has to be negative, and my number that I got was 6. So here we have it. A negative times a positive is negative.